James, I'd like to talk a little bit about political affiliations, and there have been allegations of this not just in this election but even in the previous one. Eric Mutua, who's the outgoing chair, said it during the last elections, that political, national politics plays such a big role in influencing that. Could you speak to that? Because there have been allegations that have been made back and forth amongst the three of you.
But first, before I go there, I think that there is something that I need to clarify about this whole debate of going to court. You know, for us lawyers, there's something called sub judice rule. Right now, the kind of things that we are trying to talk about, they're going to court, those issues are before the court. And it will not be right for us to debate the pros and cons and of what is in court at this particular point. And I think that it is important that we let the courts decide. We let the courts decide as to who was right, whether the chairman had adjourned the meeting correctly. But the other thing which I also wanted to point out before I go to your question, you see, if you look at the Law Society in the past, it's been speaking for the members, especially during the one-party system. When you see my brother Gibson Kamau Kuria, yes. Paul Kibuge Muite, who stood for democracy at that particular time. You see, that was a slightly different time. The Law Society has evolved over the years. What then is the Law Society should be doing at this particular time is to walk the straight, narrow path. We don't want to be seen as a political party because the Law Society is a professional body.
But are you saying there are no issues that the Law Society cannot speak to at this moment simply because we are now in a multi-party system?
No, there are many issues. In fact, the Law Society has been speaking. For myself, I have been on record about many things. I have talked about the corruption. The last time when there was the act that amended the Judicial Act that wanted to take the powers of the JC away. In fact, I'm the only presidential candidate among my brothers sitting here who spoke about it openly. And then I've also stood for the freedom of the press. But I think what we can say is that the Law Society has done quite a bit, but there's more that needs to be done. And I agree that when I become president, we're going to do much more.
All right, speak to us about political affiliations.
The political affiliations, I have been a council member previously. And each year I get elected by both sides of the divide. I have never been affiliated to any political party. But
sorry, you said both sides of the divide. Which divide?
I mean, both, you know, in our country, and you know, you cannot say this political divide, because you remember, in 2000, you had the NRC, and you also had the LDP, but they keep on changing. You see, in this particular country, if you come from a certain particular region, there is assumption that because Mwamu comes from Western Kenya, he must be therefore affiliated to CORD. There will be assumption that my brother here, because he comes from Central, will be affiliated to Jubilee. But I think these are really assumptions. But the other thing that I think we need to observe is this, that every citizen of the Republic has a right to hold a political opinion. But that is different from having a political affiliation. If by political affiliation will mean that I am actively participating in a political party, which me as a person have not participated in, you would say, for example, Mwamu is a secretary for affairs in CORD or in Jubilee. I am a professional lawyer leading professional people.
Okay.
So there is no political affiliation as far as I'm concerned. At least I can speak for myself on that particular point.
All right, Isaac,
let me interject there. And I'm glad this question has been raised, because as you've correctly pointed out, it has become part of the discourse of this election. First of all, there is no place for political affiliation in the Law Society of Kenya itself. But that isn't to say that members of the Law Society of Kenya, as Kenyans, are not entitled to enjoy political affiliations of whichever party that they decide to affiliate themselves with. In fact, I think that for an advocate of the High Court to be involved in one way or another in the affairs of any political party would only enrich the activities of that political party, because he or she will be taking into that party the ideals, the objects and the principles that all advocates abide by under their oath. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Having said that, let me finish my point. Okay. Having said that, the fact that this comes up every time there's an election cycle in the Law Society of Kenya is an indication that there are certain people who want to inject that into the conversation in order to try and influence voters one way or the other.
Which certain people?
Can I interject into this? You see, when you are a council member of the Law Society of Kenya, you are a council member of all the lawyers irrespective of which political party they belong.
Right.
There comes a time when a certain political party makes a statement or take a certain type of decision that conflicts with the objective of the Law Society. You must therefore remain to the fidelity of the Law Society Act and the objectives. It is not possible for you to sit in the board of another political party and to hold the presidency of the Law Society of Kenya. It is not possible. It is a different thing to hold a political opinion, as I've said. But you cannot go and sit in the board of a political party and say it is all right. It is not all right. Because you see, a situation will come when the two political parties begin to fight. And then the Law Society is called upon to pronounce itself. How will you, if you are sitting in the other party? There will be obviously conflict of interest. In fact, one of the things that I developed was a board charter. The board charter that we have stops a council member from actively participating in political party affairs because of the conflict.
You see, these are some of the decisions I'm only learning about now that are being made in council but are not being brought to the members to ratify. So, this board charter I haven't heard of before. But let me finish my point.
The board charter has been circulated to all members, and they have a copy.
Let me finish my point. Right. Yes, and this is another thing. Circulating decisions to members so that we have copies is not engaging us so that we can make a decision as the general meeting so that we can adopt it. And this is what I mean. This is the disconnect that is so clear between the leadership and the members. The fact that a general meeting has been called for the purposes of members to pass accounts, and when it comes to members voting on the accounts, the leadership makes a decision that a vote is untenable. That's completely unheard of.
May I have my say on that?
Sure.
I think it's very simple. The Law Society, as mandated by the Act, is supposed to assist the government and the courts in the administration of justice and legislation. Now, the good thing about the Law Society Act that is now in force does provide for a directorate that will address public issues of legislation, public interest litigation, all that. And the new council that will come in place will establish that directorate. So it is not going to be who is the leader as to whether he's going to be politically affiliated or not, but it's the members who shall decide on all issues of public importance, and that's the difference. I want us as the members to decide on the destiny of the country wherever the government transcends or breaks the law. We shall take them on robustly. Not I shall do it, but we the members shall do that.
Okay.
I'm glad Mr. Gichuri has brought up the matter of directorates, because under the Law Society of Kenya Act 2014, which came into law in January 2015, a year ago, it created the requirement that the Secretariat of the Law Society of Kenya, which is now at Gitanga Road, must establish directorates to improve its efficiency. A year has passed, and these directorates have never been established. The Act also makes provision for the creation of regulations. These regulations are supposed to have been formulated by council, sent out to the members, and then passed into law by the general meeting. You can see how critical this organ of governance is. The general meeting is everything. The regulations have never been put into place, which means, therefore, that the Law Society of Kenya is being governed by the council without any regulatory framework that enables the members to be engaged in any way. And when the members asked the council at the general meeting at Bomas in September of 2015, why have there been no regulations formulated? The answer was, well, we've been too busy.
James?
I think but perhaps my learned friend here, Alan, will understand how legislation works in this particular country. You don't, for example, formulate a legislation today, take it to Parliament, and it's going to be passed the same day. Council of the Law Society has already appointed committees that are working on those regulations, and it takes quite a bit of time. These are things that you have to consult and take them to the relevant committees.
How much time will it take?
You see, when a committee asks for time to look at all these things, you have to give them that particular time. The Council of the Law Society operates through committees. The council does not draft regulations. If it is a regulation that deals with the issues of welfare, it takes to the welfare committee. If it is an issue to deal with the legislation and setting up directorates, it takes it to the staff and finance committee. These are the committees that deal with these things. So once they come up with that regulation, the regulation will be brought up to council. And this is the procedure, because it is important to understand the procedure. Once the committee has finalized working on that regulation, it brings it back to council. The council looks at it, takes it to the Attorney General office. Attorney General also looks at those regulations and then takes it to Parliament if it is a regulation that requires parliamentary approval.
So do you think Isaac and his team did not understand the process of legislation that you were talking about?
I will not say they don't understand.
No, because you said in the beginning your learned friend Alan Wood.
But you
didn't
see, for
mention
lawyers,
Isaac's. Yeah.
sometimes there's something called misapprehending the law or an error of judgment. And I think they're in error of judgment at that particular point. Because the other thing which I wanted to point out is the issue of the Law Society. He talks about the Law Society speaks on the issue of governance. I entirely agree with him on that. Because the members must therefore pick out things that also concern the members of the public. Things that affect the public directly, like, for example, issues of corruption, issues of, for example, money laundering, issues that affect the public directly. Those are issues that the Law Society must speak about. Okay,
James, I'd like to stop you there. Just get Isaac in. Do you think that the Law Society has played that role in terms of speaking to matters of public interest?
The Law Society has, that is the responsibility of the Law Society.
Yeah.
But it cannot do so to the exclusion of the members. You know, my philosophy is that in this present circumstances of the Law Society, where we have now nearly 12,000 members who have signed the rule and about 7,000 plus who are active, the role of governance must be expanded to include as many of the members as possible. And the members must be consulted at every stage when important decisions are being made. The general meeting cannot be ignored. But I want to come back to this matter of regulations, if I may. I have stated in my manifesto that under my presidency, the regulations will be enforced within 6 months. And the reason why it has got to be done as quickly as that is because without these regulations, the members cannot be engaged. A year has passed and there are no regulations. And so we cannot allow for the Law Society to continue to operate as though the members aren't involved. We have all taken the oath to protect the rule of law and the administration of justice without fear or favor. And we must allow members to be true to that.
Isaac, to my specific question, do you think the Law Society of Kenya has been playing its role effectively in terms of guiding the government and the members of the public on matters of national interest?
The Law Society has been playing the role, but it hasn't been effective. And simply because without the involvement of all the members, it cannot play this role effectively. And I want to give you an example of this.
All right.
When the amendments were passed to the Judicial Service Commission Act by the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments Act last year, the fact that this act went into Parliament as a bill and the amendments were proposed on the floor of Parliament, I think it was at the second reading in October, it wasn't until it became law in December that alarm was raised.
And this
no one was able to monitor.
Is the one that gives the president some room and some leeway in terms of deciding who the next Chief Justice of the country will be.
That's right.
Just for clarification for our viewers who are watching. James and Alan, this happened under your watch?
No.
Were you not tracking the progress of the bill?
Let me intervene. You see, you know, sometimes it is good to be honest about some of these issues.
Okay.
You see, as a law society, once you have already called for your members' contribution to the bill, the contributions are then taken to Parliament or taken to the Legal Affairs Committee. The Legal Affairs Committee goes through these things. The amendment was made at the stage where it was the plenary. How does the Law Society of Kenya Council, for example, get into the plenary to go and interject?
But did you make statements on this publicly that perhaps talked about how in the legal profession many call this unconstitutional changes to the law?
When we realized, the moment we realized that unconstitutional change had been made, and you know some of these things are passed in the dead of the night. You will not even know.
So this particular one was passed in the dead of the night?
I think there are a lot of things, and you know the other thing.
Was this particular one passed in the dead of the night?
Well, I will not say so. But
were you not aware of it when it was being passed in Parliament?
Well, when it was being you see, the amendment was made at the time when it was not something that was being done. If you look at the answer, the answer says that at this particular point, the leader of Legal Affairs Committee says we want to amend this to read this and that. You know, so It is when the Law Society realized something had gone wrong. The Law Society, of course, came out and made the statement that this was actually wrong. But you know, you don't expect the Law Society. We are not parliamentarians. What we usually do and what the role of the Law Society is, once a constitutional and constitutional law has been passed, we use the other channel, which is to challenge it in court, and which we have done on the behalf of the people of Kenya.
Okay.
So I think the Law Society has not failed. We have done the right thing and taken the right action.
All right, I'd like to speak.
If I may add on that also.
Yes, and then we can move
Yes,
quickly.
I think with Isaac, his point of view is that we have failed to do this, we have not done that. But the point is this: it behoves every member of the society, not just council, to come forward and propose amendments that should be done or bring something to the attention. So you see, it's a community of lawyers. So it's not right to blame, just say the council will slip on his job. As James rightly pointed out, we did make the contributions at the right time. If these amendments were passed in parliament when lawyers could not have had the input, there's nothing we could have done. And I'm happy to say that we did go to court. And every time the government has passed any legislation that is deemed unconstitutional, the Law Society has been the first to go to court.